Hello, everyone. This is Katana Abbott, and I want to welcome you to Smart Women Talk. This is where we search the world for smart women and a few good men, and that includes best-selling authors and change agents who were on that leading edge. So we'll have topics like money, business, health, inspiration, and the metaphysical. So today is National Caregiver. This is National Caregivers Month, and to honor that and all those people that are caregiving in the way of doctors, nurses, people in nursing homes, and all the family caregivers, we want to honor you and thank you for what you're doing. Today, I'm very happy to be interviewing speaker, author, and humorist dedicated to legal and financial education of women on aging and caregiving causes, Cathy Sikorski. And we're going to be talking about the current tsunami of legal, practical, and financial issues that are facing baby boomers and Gen X women. Yeah, when I first started in this business 10 years ago, it was all about the boomers, but now it's the Gen X's that are facing this, and we'll get into it a little bit more in just a minute. But we're going to talk about why it's important to get your caregiving documents in order, and I talk about this all the time. How to make a plan if long-term care becomes part of your life, and then the importance of having your lawyer and financial advisor work together. So in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to Cathy and tell you a little bit about her, a little bit more about her. First, I just want to share a tip. And there's a quote that when I talk about caregiving, I always share this quote, and it's by Rosalind Carter. It's so important. There are only 4 types of people: those who have been caregivers, those who are caregivers, those who will receive care, those who receive care, and those who will be caregivers in the future. So none of us are immune. And that's why for the last 30 years, I've been teaching individuals how to prepare, not just for caregiving, but the new is how to be a care receiver, because we need to prepare not only for caregiving for our loved ones, but how to be prepared in case that becomes us. And we want to do it before the triggering event. So the secret to all this planning is starting when it's early, when you have lots of options, it's affordable and lots of choices. If you don't, you could end up in court. Having a judge telling you what to do, having a court-appointed attorney, lots of fights with the caregivers, not being able to find things, and caregiving itself is stressful enough without having to do all of that. So I have 5 quick tips I'm going to share with you, and I think we're going to end up going into a lot of detail on these things. But having those important conversations with loved ones, and the holidays are coming up, it would be a great time to at least mention it. Talk about maybe what you're doing, and see if you can get your parents to talk about it. I always like to include the legacy story too. Getting organized and pulling all those documents together. We've got a great show with Annalie Kruger. She talks about her grab and go binder. I bought one. You want to have those things organized. Meeting with an attorney who focuses on elder care. We have an elder care attorney with us today. It's a lot different than estate planning, so we'll talk about that. But it's how to keep in control. And then also looking at the long-term care insurance that's out today, it's a lot different. They have hybrid policies so that you get both life insurance or an annuity benefit with the long-term care rider, so that you can have living benefits as well. So someone always gets that money. The biggest one is caregiver, protecting the caregiver. We're going to talk about that a little bit today, and we're going to talk about it extensively on our next show. So it's easy to put these things off when things are running smoothly, but if you get that call in the night, like I did, and you don't have I had everything in place, thank goodness. It was a smooth transition. But if you don't, it can be a nightmare. And I know sometimes our parents don't want to talk to us about it. So, but just heads up, we have the Smart Women's Academy. We have a new caregiving course that's coming in there, and you're going to love it with all kinds of great resources. And we're going to also have all kinds of new free gifts and resources in our new resource library. So be sure to go to Join Smart Women today. You'll get our newsletter. You'll know who's coming on the show. You'll also get access to the Smart Women's Academy with the 8 existing courses and my private coaching program. It's all free because we're donor funded, and you go to joinsmartwomen.com. So today we're talking with Cathy Sikorski. She's an elder law attorney, and she has expanded her career to become a speaker, author, and media guest to unravel the complex problems of caregiving and aging. As a caregiver for 8 different people, Cathy used her experience to author 2 books. Her latest is Who Moved My Teeth? What a great title. Preparing for self-love, loved ones, and caregiving. And it's not only funny, but it's a practical guide, and it's a #1 bestseller. So her first book, released by Humor Outcast Press, Showering with Nana, Confessions of a Serial Caregiver, is a hilarious memoir. And Cathy also has a blog that you just have to laugh, and it's where caregiving is a comedy. You'll want to check her out, Cathy with a C, Sikorski.com. So with that, okay, I finally get to say hello. Welcome, Cathy. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hello, Katana. I am very happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Hey, so how long have you been working in this field, and how did you come into this? So, this specialty, was there, and it sounds like with 8 family members or caregiving situations, was that something that happened after, or did it sway you at all to make this a?
No, definitely after. That's what exactly guided me and honed my practice into elder law. I started out as a very small town general practice attorney. And in fact, elder law wasn't even a thing when I started practicing law. I hate to say that. That makes me sound like an elder lawyer and an elder lawyer. But it wasn't a thing back then. Elder law is pretty new, actually. But you're right, with this experience where I was a caregiver for my grandmother and my aunt and my great aunt and my mom and my girlfriend who fell down the flight of stairs and had a brain injury, and my brother-in-law who had multiple sclerosis of the worst possible kind, where he was bedbound and wheelchair bound. Yes, I was the primary caregiver for all of those people. And that honed my practice. I was learning the practical side. I was doing what all of those homebound, those home caregivers do while I was going to work, just like everybody else. For me, though, I guess the fortunate piece was that my work actually surrounded itself with these kinds of issues. So I got to learn on the job. And the more I realized that, the more I just made that my practice. I stopped being a general practice lawyer and concentrated on elder law issues. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? So, I ended up, I did financial planning. I started in 1987. And thank goodness I started at a company where we worked, even though I wasn't a CFP in the beginning, we covered all 6 areas, which included the risk planning, not just, investment management like so many firms want to do, but we covered risk planning, whether it was dying prematurely, becoming disabled. I mean, I sold myself a disability policy, which I used. And I actually filed a claim after I retired from Ameriprise, and I collected on it. So thank good, I really do believe in insurance, because my dad died when I was 6. My mom paid cash for a house with the government benefits she received from the life insurance. I bought long-term care, disability insurance, which protects your income, and collected on that for many, many years. And my mother, my stepfather was kind enough to buy long-term care for them. And when she had dementia, after he passed away, she went to Sunrise. I had her here, but she was really bored, kept knocking on my door. When are you coming out? So I took her to Sunrise, just a couple miles away, and she loved it there. And so between her survivor pension and her long-term care benefit, she never had to touch any of his money, and it was a second marriage. So that worked out really well for his children.
Nice. That's a great story. And I'm also a fan of insurance. I mean, I've had long-term care insurance for a very long time. My husband had it as a benefit when he was working for a Fortune 100 company, and we bought it right away. And that was, my goodness, many, many years ago, because I already understood and recognized the value of it. You know, there's a nice little glitch about Pennsylvania attorneys that you might not know, but we are not allowed to sell financial products. In some states, attorneys do that. And as a matter of fact, this is fairly new, less than 10 years old, but they decided as a ethical consideration for attorneys that we had to choose. You're either a financial advisor or you're a legal advisor. And so I can't sell you anything financial. I can only tell you why I think it's a great idea. A lot of that is based on my practical experience, but a lot of it is also based on my legal experience. When I'm seeing when families come to my door and say, I have this long-term care episode, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and you know what, if we don't get it before the health crisis happens, so in fact, I had a couple that had it and they canceled the policy. I had very few people that did that. And then one day he came back in with his wife and said, we want to get the long-term care insurance back. And so when it came time to do the applications, he said, can you get something for her to see with her signature? And I said, does she have dementia? And he said, yes. I said, then she's not going to be able to apply for it. And they were so sad. But it's insurance is the kind of thing that you really hate paying those premiums, but boy, when you need it, it's a good thing to have. And we don't have to go into details on this, but I just want to mention that when my mom bought insurance, it was the type where if you don't use it, you lose it. And so, and they can raise the premiums. And so that kind of gave it a bad name, but really most people are not purchasing that kind of insurance anymore. They're purchasing either an annuity or a life insurance that is combined with long-term care so that you get the living benefits of long-term care tax-free if you need it. But if you never use long-term care, the death benefit or the annuity goes to your loved ones, which I think is it makes so much more sense.
It's a choice, it's the fact that you even have that choice is what's wonderful, right? So with great financial advice and great legal preparation, you are able to make so many choices in the long-term care crisis. And I am thrilled that every day the financial services industry keeps coming up with good choices.
Yeah, I am thrilled too. So let's talk about why it's important for everyone to get prepared for this. It's a tsunami that's coming towards us with issues on aging everywhere you look, healthcare. The Obamacare, is happening. Right now it's open enrollment for those listening live with Medicare and, at work. And then there's the whole thing with caregiving. I mean, it is overwhelming. What do you suggest people do?
Well, so there's two sides to this pancake, right?
Yeah.
Which you actually talked about. There's the side of the person who needs care, but there's the side of the person who's caregiving. And that can also affect them dramatically. And if they or their person that they're caring for doesn't have the documents, you have just multiplied their work and their frustration by 1,000-fold. So they've got to have their key documents, which are pretty much this. They have to have their powers of attorney. And that 30-second definition of that document is a power of attorney is a document where you give the power to someone who now is called your agent to act as if they are you in any capacity. So for a financial power of attorney, they can get into your bank account, get into your finances, use your credit card, sell your house, sell your car. I mean, it is a very powerful tool, right? With spouses, it's usually each other is the power of attorney, right? But a lot of people don't have spouses. So you have to choose someone and choose wisely, but you have to have that person, because I always say people think that this is for aging and older adults, but not a one of us knows what's going to happen to us tomorrow. You could walk out that door, get hit by a truck and be in a coma for 6 months. and you
Right.
can be 37 years old. If somebody doesn't have your power of attorney in order to take care of your affairs, you are tying their hands. And if you are married and you have 3 little kids, your spouse is probably in deep, deep trouble because he or she doesn't have the capacity or access to your funds, wherever they may be. It's
Mhm.
very, very possible. And it all harkens back to how we save money. You know, in the old days, your grandparents, my grandparents, even my parents saved money with joint everything, joint bank
Yes.
accounts, joint savings accounts, joint CDs, joint everything. We don't do that anymore. Everybody saves in an IRA, a 401k, a 403b. And you know, and I know, Katana, that that can only be owned legally by one person.
Right.
So if that one person's in a coma and doesn't have any documents that say somebody else can have access to that money, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
So that's why you have to have those documents. When my children went to college at 18, I made them sign powers of attorney because I didn't want anyone telling me that they were adults and couldn't take, you know, I couldn't take care of their affairs,
So
right?
Kathy, now that you have that document,
Mm-hmm.
does that also, because I'm wondering, does that also allow you to, if something, they were to become incapacitated, to be able to access all those social media accounts, you know, their passwords?
So my document does because we in Pennsylvania just instituted the Uniform Digital. Oh, it's a big long acronym that I can't, which is really weird. But yes, I mean, we were putting that in our documents anyway, but the state of Pennsylvania, along with I think something like 32 other states now has that. But you better have that language in there. You need that. That's critical. And yes, think about young people. Where is everything? It's in their phone,
Yes,
right?
it is. Yeah.
And that's only their financial power of attorney. They also have to have a healthcare power of attorney. There's 2 different ones, and you've got to have both because you need someone making medical decisions for you. You need someone to be able to talk to the insurance company. That falls under the healthcare power of attorney, the doctor, the pharmacist, the durable medical equipment, right? It is explosive when you're in a crisis, the authority that you need to have.
Right.
And it all boils down to that one piece of paper, either financial or healthcare. So you got to have them both. You have to do it
Have
now.
the-
Do it,
their-
do it, do it yesterday.
Yeah, to have that. And what about to file a lawsuit on someone's behalf for
It
their
had,
benefit?
so
Would
the
that
interest,
help?
that's a really good question. And it might, it depends on, you know, what the issue is, if they were in a car accident or something like that.
I'm
But
thinking,
here's
that's what
the
I'm
thing.
thinking, you know,
Mhm.
that's how, let's say they had a brain injury and not
From a
only
car.
did you want to, yeah. So could you then, instead of having to go to court and be named as a guardian
Right.
conservator,
Exactly.
you could have these documents and you could then file on their behalf perhaps?
Which is, yes, absolutely. But which is why
Ah,
your documents have to be really well done. And
okay,
that's why you have to have an elder attorney who deals with these kinds of issues. You know, estate lawyers have been around since the Magna Carta. We were doing powers of attorney back in the 70s and 80s, you know, before elder law was a thing and we weren't thinking about these things. And I happen to live in a state where we are particularly snarky about our powers of attorney and our requirements. We have very, very detailed and specific requirements about getting people's money. It's meant to protect people, but it can also be a nightmare if you just download something from the internet or you go to your local, you know, general practice attorney and they are not familiar with these issues. You've got to make sure you're asking the right questions about what your needs are and if they know how to do this, right?
so do all the states, I know for the medical, there's the durable power of attorney for health, but then there's also naming someone to be your patient advocate. Do you have that in Pennsylvania? Because that's what we have here.
We don't have a different thing. A lot of people have a living will. It was just also a different thing. And that really has a very narrow focus, which is if I'm in a permanent vegetative state, do you pull the plug or do you not pull the plug? What have I said about that? Right. So that's even a third kind of a document that you're talking about. I know that the newest federal law, the Family Care Act, which talks about, you know, having a patient advocate and allowing that. But I think your power of attorney would probably even supersede that because it would even have more legal impact because the person signed it when they were healthy and chose a person to be in charge of that.
Right.
But everything you have is good. But having as opposed to not having is always good, right? So yeah,
Wow. So
all
it's so
those things.
important with these kids, they turn 18. We want to make sure that they have this. And, I mentioned earlier about Annalie Kruger, who has Care Right as her business. I'll
Yes,
let
I
everyone,
know her. She's wonderful.
oh, good, you do know her. She is
Yeah,
great.
she and I are doing a program in a couple days, actually.
She just did one today at noon, which I missed, and she has another one coming up in December.
November is a very busy month for people in our field. Yes,
Oh, yes,
yes,
yes. And
yes.
so thank you again for being here today.
Happy to do it. But anyway,
So,
yes,
yeah, but she has that grab and go binder. And
excellent.
so how important is it for us to have all our documents pulled together in one place?
So, okay, here's number one, have them. You have to have your financial durable power of attorney. You have to have your healthcare power of attorney. I would like you to have a living will. I really want you to have a living will, not so much because I want you to say whether you want to pull the plug or not pull the
Yeah.
plug. I'm okay, whatever. What I want you to have that for is that when your mother or your sister or someone has to pull the plug, there's a document that says, I chose that, so that everybody who comes out of the woodwork and has an opinion about whether it should be done, it takes the person in charge off the hook. It says, look, mom decided this, not me. We're going to do what mom said she wants to do. Not you, not you, not you, not even me. Even if I don't agree with it, that's why I like that document. So yes, if you have all these, and your will, of course, obviously, you should have a will. And you should have a will that you made not 30 years ago. Like freshen up your will. I tell people you made those wills when you were young and you had little kids and you got a guardian for them and you let it sit in that underwear drawer next to your sexy lingerie, and neither of those things came out of the drawer for 25 years. Pull it out, put on the granny panties of wills and get everything covered that needs to be covered.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Think about that. I mean, so many life changes, right? I mean,
So many things change.
yeah.
You've got to pay attention to this. Every 5 years or so, you should look at this stuff and say, does it do what I want it to do? And beneficiary designations, which I'm sure I haven't seen her grab and go book, but I've read about it and I've talked to her about it and I know it's wonderful. So there can never be a bad reason to have all your documents together in a place. I can't think of any bad reason that you would do that.
Well, and you just mentioned the beneficiary designations, and let me just tell you what I would run into is that companies are being, banks. We saw that for years where all the banks were being bought out, brokerage firms, and
Yep.
people would have the original investment, which was now somewhere else. And I'll give you so you need to update and make sure you have copies of those beneficiary designations. So
Correct.
here I am, the financial planner. I purchased privately held stock and put it into a self-directed IRA out here in Michigan. That company got purchased by Quest IRA. So I was in there doing some updates on my account, right? And so I asked them, I said, could I get a copy of my beneficiary designation and could I get a copy of the certificate? And they came back and they go, we don't have that. And I thought, well, what if I died? This is a private company. My family would never know about it, right? So they went and researched, and I said, it's probably with the company that I originally set it up with. And they did end up finding it. But, I don't know how difficult that would have been if it would have even been found.
Would they have even done the homework? They would have just said, no, never mind. It's got to go to her estate or, or whatever.
So I'm not sure. So, but I did have a copy on my computer, but again, someone would have had to go in and actually the actual IRA certificate is held with a custodian. So people have to understand this. With banks, there may not even be a record is what I'm saying.
Right.
Selling and transferring things, and then that money is either lost or you're in some big, hiring some detective to go try to track it down somehow.
Exactly. So the big picture is know where you need beneficiary designations and then check your beneficiary designations, make sure they do what you want to do, and then check them again 5 years from now because things change. What if you leave everything to your son and daughter-in-law and your daughter-in-law divorces him and hates him and you hate her, quite frankly, and everything is bad and you never took her off the insurance? You're not going to be happy about that.
Yeah.
He's really not going to be happy about that.
Right. Yeah. And I have a friend, she's been on the show. She wrote a book about this. She became a financial planner because of this and wrote the
Mm,
book. She was married to a CPA who, loved her and they planned on, living together their whole life, and he was leaving everything to her. He didn't update his life insurance. So when he passed, his life insurance went to his ex-wife, and she was pregnant with twins.
a million times that
He
has
was
happened.
so furious.
A million times. Now, there have been actually laws put into place since then to actually help with that kind of a thing in a divorce situation. But why are you going to hang your hat on that? Pay attention. This is your money. Pay
Yes.
attention, and pay attention if it's your spouse's money, because many people, especially in our baby boom and Gen X generation, we're still the old school where we were working at places for 25 and 30 years, right? And you filled out that life insurance document that many years ago and never fixed it. If you even filled it out because you were 22 years old and you never bothered. Now
Right.
you're 42 years old and, so you've got to pay attention to that. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so let's talk for a moment, because I know for us it's so obvious, but for people listening, can you share the different ways? So let's say someone passes, right?
Yes,
What are the
yes.
different ways, forms of ownership, let's say, that people pass things? How are things passed? Because there's, what is passed through beneficiary designation or through, different forms of
So,
ownership. And then I'd
so,
love for you to go into the idea of a trust, because the trust is such an important item too. But
so,
this is outside a trust. This is,
yes, yes. So generally, if you die, anything that you own jointly automatically goes to the person who owns it with you. So that doesn't pass through anything. That is considered yours right away if you own it jointly. Well, and then there's joint tenants with right of survivorship, which is the whole different thing. But part of it might pass, part of it might pass. But if you own something jointly, generally, especially with a spouse, it's going to go right to your spouse. Those 401ks, those IRAs, those 403bs, and some annuities are only owned by you.
and the
That's
life insurance.
There is no way around that. It can only be owned by you. And so, yeah, but life insurance is different a little
Okay,
bit.
you're right. Okay, I didn't interrupt it. Okay, go
No,
ahead.
that's okay. And so those have to have a beneficiary designation. And now with the Secure Act, which changed the way that gets rolled over and basically, inherited, it's super complex and complicated. A spouse is not the same as any other person, except maybe a disabled child. I mean, this is how complicated it is. We could talk for 3 weeks straight about the complexities of things like what happens when you die or what happens when you're sick and disabled, right? With your money. Trusts are a completely other horse of a different color. Trusts are set up, and there's a gazillion kind of trusts, because there's special needs trusts if you want to set something up for a child, usually who has a special need. And I could be an adult child, obviously, or a sibling who is disabled, something like that. And then there's irrevocable trusts, and there's revocable trusts. And I was just learning today about SLATs, which are spousal. I don't even know what they are yet because I didn't finish my seminar. The point being that trusts, you are on someone's death, are determined, or the money goes by whatever the language of the trust says. So I can't even tell you how that goes, because every single trust, it's the language of the trust that tells you what's going to happen to the money. So they're basically a contract that's set up to transfer assets in some fashion. But what I will tell you about trusts that I see as a failure in financial services thousands of times is financial advisors will set up a nice, big, beautiful leather bound book that says it's a trust, and they will never put anything in it. They will not fund the trust. And I think sometimes they don't even know how to do that. They've just been told that a trust is a good idea, but they don't. And by not funding a trust, you don't have a trust. You just have a bunch of pieces of paper and a leather bound book that you paid several $1,000s for.
Except with a pour over will. But you have to go through probate, which is
Now, see, probate in my state is almost nothing. It's very cheap. Nobody cares about it. It's not a big deal. I know in California, I don't know about where you live. I know California probate can be very expensive. And so that has been used as a selling point that you don't want to go through probate. In Pennsylvania, probate is not the daunting thing that people make it out to be. There are always advantages of a trust not going through probate, but not necessarily a reason to create a trust if there's no other financial protections that you're going to get from it.
Right. But
You
it
might
is
just,
private that way too, though.
it is, but I don't know about you, but I don't go to the courthouse and look at other people's wills. I mean, I'm sorry. I just think that that's another thing thrown in there. It is, it's private. I can't argue with that. It's absolutely private, but that wouldn't be the biggest reason to do it. It would be about a financial benefit that you're trying to create for you or your family or your legacy.
So I'll give you
Which,
an example, like with my parents, when they were 58 and 74, and I was a financial advisor, he was going to leave everything to my mom and joint ownership. And I said, Dad, you could, disinherit your kids, which are almost mom's age, right?
right,
So I said, let's look at some options. I took them to an elder law attorney like you. And what we ended up doing, and tell me if I've got a Q-tip, we did
oh
we
yeah,
did
yeah, yeah, a
income for
trust.
my mother during her
Mhm.
lifetime. He put
Perfect.
everything into the trust.
Yep,
And then my mother would get income during her lifetime and then an extra if she needed it. But then at her death, all the assets stayed in the bloodline. That's how I like to word it.
right.
To the client, they understand that. So my mom will get income, which that's what I want, but I don't want to inherit your money. I want it to go to your children who are almost her age and they're going to need it for their own retirement and children. And he bought her long-term care. And I was like, I love you so much.
It's a
He
great
just,
thing. And he may have, see, your state may be very different from mine. He may have avoided inheritance tax issues with that or estate tax issues. He may have done that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a great idea. It's
yeah,
a super great idea. Well planned tool. But you know what the key to all of this is he had a plan. You
yes.
took him to someone besides yourself and said, look, between the financial person and the legal person, let's come up with a plan that works for everyone.
And one day I walked into his house and said, Dad, why is the bookshelf in the middle of the room, in the dining room? Why is it here? And it was filled with papers. He said, I can't handle the papers anymore. It's overwhelming me. And he was an IRS agent. He was brilliant, but he was in his 80s.
Yeah,
And I said, so you have this trust. Would you like me to take over managing your trust, managing your finances? And
yeah,
he said, oh, that would be so good. And so because everything was already in the trust, it was a matter of filing a form
right.
for myself and his son to be, co-trustees,
Trustees.
successors trustees, I guess, but he was still living. But we were able to do everything then for him. And so I just want people to know how wonderful it is when they can meet with someone like you and put these documents in place and then make sure that it gets funded, how it can change their life. They don't have to
And the other
deal
thing
with
I
it
want people
after
to
the
know
fact.
is this is not just for rich people. People think that it's for rich people.
Mhm.
I assure you, what you might think is a rich person is probably you,
Yeah.
right? I am telling you that my 18-year-old kids had powers of attorney, right? I am telling you that nobody knows what's going to happen when you walk out the door. So you should be prepared for at least being able to handle situations. Even if you don't have a big savings, if something happens to your young spouse and you need access to social security and access to getting their health care and whatever, you need to have these documents. It
Mm.
goes from the smallest to the absolute largest, so you've got to do this. You got to do it.
So let's talk about the idea of, what impact does caregiving have on our financial situation and for both the caregiver and the care receiver? Because one thing I just want to point out is that I ended up becoming a caregiver at 47. I retired, and I sold my practice at that point. But if I didn't have that option and I just left, period,
Hmm.
it would have had a financially devastating impact on my life. And I just want to share this, that when we talk about women at midlife, quits her job to become a caregiver, the average is losing $324,000 a year. I mean, not a year, but in lifetime
In
for
life. Mhm.
savings into retirement plans, pension and social security benefits, all the salary and bonuses, and just, the loss of time in the workforce that can have on someone. And so we have to, and it's an honor to be able to do those things, but sometimes often it has a detrimental effect emotionally and financially. So give us, like, from your viewpoint, what are some of the things that you see affect the caregiver and the care receiver when that triggering event happens?
So statistically, even without me having done this, I stepped out of you can't imagine how many times did I step out of the workforce to help take care of my friends. I could still work some, but certainly was not a high powered, 40, 60, 80 hour a week attorney, because I was caregiving. Plus I have two little kids, that I have raised. I was fortunate to have a husband who, was willing to let me be this person. And I am very, very lucky that way. But what happens is, of course, from the caregivee side, the person who is doing the caregiving, or the caregiver side, they're going to lose money. They're going to lose financial security. And honestly, I am at the point where I say we need to stop this nonsense. We need to stop, and it does impact women more than men, but it doesn't mean it doesn't impact men, but it does impact women more than men. They step out of the workforce to be caregivers an average of 8 years of work time, which means they lose raises, they lose they are not seen as people with experience, even though their caregiving experience is invaluable and can be certainly turned into something, dramatically good at work. And so they have less social security, they have less retirement, and that's all well and good until they get to that age of retirement. And then they become the person who has to decide between medication and food because they don't have this savings.
Social Security looks at your last 40 quarters, your last 10 years. So what you just said, right? If you step out of the workforce, those last 10 years, that will severely affect your pension and your Social Security, which you wouldn't even think of because it's not something because you're funding it.
And for most
And
people, that's your highest earning years because
yes,
you're getting
those
into your
credits.
experience and you're, so if you have a spouse, right, which is why something like 79% of women take their spousal share of Social Security because it's higher than their work share,
Yeah.
right? Which is all great. If you are in a very healthy relationship and you have a great marriage for, 35, 45 years, this is all wonderful. You've got a great financial plan, but here's the problem. Women live longer, men get sick faster, and men's savings and money are depleted in the long-term care world because let's circle all the way back to those 401ks, those IRAs, those 403bs. Guess who own them? Your husband. And a nursing home says, oh boy, he's got a lot of money. Let's take his. So if you don't have a plan to protect that money that is in his name, you can be looking down the barrel of destitution as someone who has led a very nice life up until that point, because you have been a caregiver for his mom, his dad, your brother, who knows, right? Your children. So women have to be aware of the fact that being a caregiver is going to have a big financial impact, not to mention, as you said, emotional, stressful, whatever. It's going to have that as well. Obviously, it's a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, and one of the stats is that if you're caring for someone with Alzheimer, 40% of the time the caregiver dies before the person
Exactly.
with
I
Alzheimer.
just had I just had this conversation of a practical nature with a friend of a friend, because this is my friend, this is what's going on. I said, she may very well die before him because the stress of this is killing her,
Yeah.
right? And this was about how can she sleep at night because he is sundowning, he's causing problems, she doesn't have a communication capability between his bedroom and her bedroom. It was just a very practical conversation. It had nothing to do with money or anything like that, so there's a billion moving pieces to this. The other side is, if you're the person being cared for, I want you to think about these things in terms of your plan. How are you going to pay for it? What kind of care do you want? Are you expecting your children to take care of you, or is that absolutely anathema to you and you don't want them caring for you at all? And if that's true, how is that going to work? What are your expectations from others? Do you expect someone to build a mother-in-law quarters onto their house? You know, do you want to use your money for caregiving? Is that a conversation you've had? Like, you're okay with that? Most people aren't, but maybe you are. I don't know. Maybe you are. Or do you want your money to go to your heirs or your charity? Maybe you have no heirs, but you have a charity that's really critically important to you, or a legacy. People talk about their legacy all the time, Katana. I don't know if you see that, but you must. It,
Absolutely. In
it is
fact, the
so
studies are showing
important.
people are more interested in the legacy as
Mm,
far as the stories and the lessons learned from that loved one
Yep,
than they are even than the money. But most people do want to pass that money. They don't want it all going to caregiving. I
they
mean, that's
don't.
what I found.
They don't. I agree with you, but that,
Are you?
unless you have a plan
Yeah.
about how that's going to work, and that's from the person who's getting the care. We talked about the person who's giving the care and how it can be, a little bit debilitating for them. But what about the person getting the care? You have a responsibility to have a plan.
Yeah.
That's so like I love how you talked about holidays are coming, great time for conversations. But honestly, here's a plus to COVID, I think. We are going to have much more intimate holidays this year.
Yeah.
We're not going to have maybe the 20 people that you have for holidays. Maybe you're only going to have 4 or 6. Maybe it's just you and your parents. Maybe that's a perfect time to say, you know what? It's just us. There's no work going on. Let's just talk about what we think should happen if anything happens to you
Mhm.
or to me. Or to me, if I'm your go-to person, what are we going to do?
I
Right? The intimacy of what these holidays might bring, because we can't have big gatherings or lots of crazy parties or whatever, might be a great time for these important conversations,
mhm.
which is just such a great little segue to that's my next book. It's going to be about having these conversations, like literally, here's the conversations you have to have with yourself, your people, your financial advisor, your doctor. Like, you have to have these conversations.
So give us an example of those kind of conversations, because I do want to share something with you that happened to me. One of the women that I met through LinkedIn, and she and I were putting together a caregiving course, which you'll be proud
Nice.
of.
I've
Just
heard
so
you
you
saying
know.
that. That's so great. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, so the interviews of the different experts and resources and that type of thing. And so we were talking about, let's do a panel discussion. She said, "Yeah, oh yes." And then she goes, "I can be on there, and then I can bring my daughter to talk about how she saw me as the caregiver to my parents, and then because she'll be my caregiver." So she talked to her daughter, and her daughter said something that made her jaw drop. She said, "Mom, if you think I'm going to be your caregiver, she says, you better make other plans, because I am a nurse all day long. I saw what you went through. The last thing I want to do is do the same thing when I come home at night." And her mom was just flabbergasted. So she called me up and she said, "It looks like I'm going to have to do a plan." Like you said, my daughter's not my plan, but she thought her daughter's a nurse. This is, sorry about that. But
Right? Didn't I just say that to you? What are my expectations from others?
yes, yep. Isn't that
Nobody, maybe you don't get to have those expectations, right? You
so we're
can't,
looking, yeah, we're looking, she doesn't have a husband. This is her
yeah.
only daughter. So we're looking at some long-term care, and she doesn't have a lot of money, but she mentioned she has she has a stream of income that's going to show up that could be perfect for that. And so we have to sometimes look for an unusual way maybe to even fund it. And
So, yes. So here's an example of that, which I don't think is available to you. It's just, but the point that we're making, which is what you just said, which is you've got to sort of keep looking. You got to keep doing your homework about this. But in Pennsylvania, we have this amazing Quaker organization called Friends Life Care. And people can put in something like 500 to 2,500 a month. It depends on what plan you choose. But the concept behind it is you get a care coordinator, you get home care for however many hours that you've, and it's going to be, because you've put your money into this pool, you're going to get more than if you would have had to buy it by yourself later, right? And the concept is that it's a Quaker based organization that understands the cost of long-term care, and they're trying to reduce it and give you more benefits, keep you in your home, but share the wealth, share the cost, right? So it's an unusual thing. It's not everywhere, but it is another look at a different kind of plan.
Well, it's like there have to be new innovative ideas
Exactly.
coming.
Exactly.
And my girlfriends and I have always talked about, since we all figure we'll live longer than our husbands. Now I've got one that's 5 years younger than me. So maybe that's,
Good for
that's kind
you.
of nice. But we talked about having these little houses that would be kind of
Yeah.
connected.
Oh, me too. My
Dining
girlfriends and I.
area,
Yeah.
and have a really cute chef.
Yep, in the tiny house. And then we'll have one in the middle, which is like the social house,
The
where
big
we'll go
house,
for
right, the big house.
dinner.
So
And
you have like your little, private area off to
yep,
the side. And it could be a way for socialization, but also pooling of costs and
yeah,
resources, and getting away from the idea of institutionalized kind of
exactly.
care that people are, because 54% of people receive care in home.
Yeah.
52% of claims for it are for long-term care are for in-home care. So most care is given in home.
People would prefer in home, but the
Yes.
way the system is set up for Medicaid is that we don't want to pay. They're just turning a corner now.
Yes.
But in the beginning, in the last 20 years, it was always, no, we'll pay for a nursing home, but we're not going to pay for you to be at home. And it made no sense at all, because it was always cheaper to pay for someone to come to your house
Right.
than it was for someone to be in a nursing home. And
Oh.
it has to shift, and it's going to shift. It's going to shift by demand, and it's going to shift by cost, right? But
Yeah.
it's like you said, Katana, it's going to be we're going to continue to have creative responses. But individually, we have to be responsible about what we see as a plan. And so the surprise story of your girlfriend finding out her daughter is like, no, that's not happening, is something that is just because of those conversations that we're not having.
So, you mentioned COVID. Tell us, what are some of the legal issues people are facing now because of COVID? We hear some of those on the news, not being able to see loved ones and that kind of thing. But are there other issues that we have to be aware of?
I was a bit concerned about those pull the plug or not pull the plug things, because if I'm in a permanent vegetative state, like, does that change with, like, do they think you're in a permanent state, or is it COVID? And does it mean you're going to come out of it? You just have to be on a ventilator for a while, kind of a thing. And I've had this conversation with other elder lawyers, and they said they haven't really changed their documents or anything. They're sort of left that up to the medical profession. But it seems like the medical profession is treating COVID much more cautiously in terms of that. So I was worried about that. In terms of nursing homes and not being able to go in and see, I see that I don't know if you see this, but where I live, they're relaxing that a little bit. People are starting to be able to have an hour with their loved ones. They're giving them a little more time face to face. They're limiting who that person can be. I think we just sort of had to muddle through, right? But it's restrictive, but it's getting better. But of course, numbers are going up. So they may have to back down again, but it's for safety. So I get it. I get that we never did this before.
No, it's very scary.
It's not meant to be cruel. That's what people need to remember. It's meant to be helpful. It's just very hard.
Well, one of the things you mentioned is you got your long-term care insurance through your husband. For those listening live right now, it's Medicare enrollment till December 7th, I think it is. And many of us are getting the packets to review that have employer plans, and there's FSAs and, health savings accounts and all kinds of other benefits. So you had mentioned that there was some benefit programs that we can access, or we can ask our employer about, that have to do with elder care, or what did you want to share in that area?
I just wanted to say that a lot of you, if you work for corporations, they have ESAs and they have a lot of benefit plans like that where people aren't taking advantage of. Often they offer in-home care, they offer daycare for your elders, for, if you are a caregiver, and people don't even know about it. So I say contact your HR and find out if there are programs for caregivers to help you with the cost of caregiving, because they're usually out there.
Wow, that's, see, so say, what is the ESA? Because
Oh, criminy, employees. Oh, shoot. You got me. I can't remember. My mind has gone.
I mean, because there, you know, there are so many that we actually did a show on it a couple
Yeah,
of years
right. So
ago.
you're saying, but they're employee
Yeah.
benefit programs
That's what I was
attached
going to
to,
say. Okay.
yes, yes. And
So
there's
ask at work.
HR is where you ask.
Okay, because now what kind of things are employers thinking right now? Because with the aging population, there's two things going on. I remember 10 years ago, the big issue was, you know, becoming a caregiver. And so many of us as baby boomers, you know, in our late 40s, into our 50s and 60s, you know, we were the caregiver. Now the big issue for us baby boomers is who's going to take care of me when I get old?
Right.
And one of the things that I loved when I looked at your topic, it was you included Gen Xers because they're the next group coming up. And then of course for us, like I'm 62, right? Qualifying for Social Security and, you know, Medicare in a few years, you know, we have to look at you know, our children and planning, having the conversation with them to let them know. So I love the
Exactly.
idea that you brought up both, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I bought long-term care insurance through my husband's employer. That still exists today, and it's actually coming back. So again, another benefit. And you talked about having disability insurance. You know, sometimes you can buy that from your employer, and people don't take advantage of that. But there are long-term care insurance policies often through your employer. There are, like I said, caregiving benefits. Often they have caregiving platforms, which can help you with just the day-to-day or finding resources. People are missing out on these benefits that employers are in fact providing, and especially now that we're all home, right? These things are still available. Don't miss them just because you're not in the office. Contact your HR if you feel you need that benefit. Even people have legal services that they can get at a discount, where they can get these documents that we're talking about.
You know, that is amazing. Yeah. So I think that's a great way to end it because the timing is so perfect. We're at the top of the hour, and you have something that you can, that our listeners can get from you. How do they contact you? You have a handout with important things that
I
they need
do.
to know. What is that?
So email me at Cathy, CATHY .Sikorski, SIKORSKI, my number, oh, you know, you might not be able to see the screen, at gmail.com. So Cathy, CATHY .Sikorski, SIKORSKI at gmail.com. And I'll send you a gift.
Okay. And what is the list?
Two things I want to give you. I want to give you the super secret forms that are going to get you to talk to Medicare and the veterans if you have somebody that you're caring for. And I'll also give you a handout about a lot of the important topics we talked about today.
Perfect. That's wonderful. Okay. Wonderful, Cathy. Well, it has been so wonderful to have you here
Thank
during
you, Katana.
National Caregivers Month. You have such an important message for everyone. And I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy, busy life to come here and be on our show.
Thank you so much. It has been a great day.
Yeah, it's been great. So for all of you, please come join our list. You can go to smartwomensempowerment.org. But you can also just go to joinsmartwomen.com. You'll join our list. You'll know what's going on. You'll know the new classes that we have coming up. And next week, we're talking about how to protect the caregiver. And until then, go out and live with more purpose, passion, and prosperity. Bye-bye.